In this video, I'm going to set up VMware Workstation Player on a Windows 11 host PC. So the system requirements for VMware Workstation Player is relatively high because you need to run your Windows 11 host operating system, and you essentially need the system requirements to run an operating system on top of this operating system. So you're going to want a high-end 11th generation processor or superior. You're going to want at least 16 gigabytes of RAM installed and 1 terabyte solid state drive, and then a dedicated graphics card will help out as well. So before getting started with the installation, I'm just going to power off the system, and I'm going to power it up and press F2 to get to the Dell BIOS setup. So basically I'm looking for any virtualization technologies within the advanced settings, and unfortunately on this model none seem to be listed. So if the technologies are listed on your host PC, you're going to want to enable them in the BIOS setup, and this will give you additional options when configuring a guest virtual machine, which may give you some slight performance increases. Okay, so I'm going to discard the changes and exit and log back into the Windows 11 host. So I'm going to press Windows and R and type in appwiz.cpl, and this takes me to the legacy uninstall or change a program, where we can turn Windows features on or off. So what we want to do is just scroll down, and we want to enable the virtual machine platform and the Windows Hypervisor platform, and then select OK. So it's going to apply the change, and then it's going to request for a restart. So now that we've got these technologies enabled, we can install VMware Workstation Player. So VMware has been acquired by Broadcom, and VMware Workstation Player is now free to use for personal use. Unfortunately, the Broadcom website is terrible and there's issues signing in. We can access the installer using the backend. And once you've downloaded the installer, we can go ahead and launch it. So accept the license agreement and just install using the default options. You can opt in or out of the customer experience program, and you can select or uncheck a desktop icon shortcut. VMware Workstation Professional is now installed. Okay, so the next thing we're going to need is an installation ISO to create the virtual machine guest with. So I'm going to look at 2 operating systems, and there'll be timestamps in the video. So first of all, I'm going to look at Ubuntu. So I'm going to look at Ubuntu 24.10, and then I'm going to look at Windows 11 24H2. So I'm going to need to go to the Canonical website and download the latest Ubuntu installation ISO. So now that I have the installation ISO, I can open up VMware Workstation Player. Let me just pin it to the start. And then I can select Player, File, New Virtual Machine, and then I can browse and go to Downloads and select the Ubuntu 24.10 ISO. Notice that Ubuntu 24.10 has been selected. So in the next screen, input your full name and then input your username, and this has to be all in lowercase, and then input a password and confirm. So this screen is an old screen when there was a essentially setup wizard where these settings got automatically input during the Ubuntu installation. All the options you input here are ignored, and you're going to have to re-enter them during the Ubuntu setup. So just select next, and here you've got the virtual machine name and the location on the host. So there's basically a virtual machines folder in documents, and then there's this Ubuntu 64-bit subfolder. So the next screen will ask about the size of the virtual hard drive, and it's going to give 20 gigabytes by default, which is restrictive. So I'm just going to change this to 256 gigabytes, and this virtual drive isn't going to occupy 256 gigabytes. It just means it can go up to a maximum size of 256 gigabytes if you fill up the Ubuntu operating system. Next, we're just going to customize the hardware. So 4 gigabytes of RAM is the default. I wouldn't recommend increasing this to 8 gigabytes unless you've got 32 gig of RAM or more. The number of processors is 2, and I'm just going to leave this at the default. The CD, DVD should be the Ubuntu 24 ISO. The network adapter is going to be at its default. The USB controller can be set to 3.1. as the updated Linux kernel supports USB 3.1, and the sound card and display can be left at their default settings. So now we can select close and finish, and this is going to power on the virtual machine. And here I'm just going to ignore this message about virtual machine side channel mitigations. So the Ubuntu guest will boot using the Ubuntu ISO, and this will take you to the Linux Live environment. So here we're just going to select our language, and then we're going to select next, and then we're going to select our keyboard layout. And let me just test the 2 keys to make sure I don't have a US keyboard layout. And then we can use the wired connection, and then we can just select install Ubuntu, go for the interactive installation with the default selection. Let's enable the third-party software for graphics and Wi-Fi hardware, and download and install support for the additional media formats. So that's the multimedia codecs. Select erase disk and install Ubuntu. And now you're going to need to create your user account. So everything you input previously is ignored, as you can see. So let me just call the computer name VM, and then my username is going to be Philip, and this has to be all in lowercase because your user folder essentially matches what you input here. So input a password and then confirm the password, and then select next, and then select your location on the map, and then select next, and then install. So the installation will now take about 10 minutes to proceed, and then after you're going to be prompted to restart. So after the restart, you can log in just by selecting your username and then inputting your password. So now you'll be shown the out-of-the-box experience, so just select next, and then select next, and then select finish. Since Ubuntu 24.10 is using a modern Linux kernel, open VMware tools are pre-installed, and therefore you can resize the Ubuntu 64-bit window on the Windows 11 host, and the Ubuntu virtual machine will automatically resize to this Windows size. So as you've seen, I made it full screen. Now on Ubuntu 24.10, all mounted drives are shown on the left hand side on the panel. So notice the CD DVDs displayed until I disconnected them. There's also a floppy disk, so basically the installation automatically added a floppy drive and an additional CD DVD drive, And the reason these are here are for the installation of open VMware tools on older versions of Ubuntu which don't have this pre-installed in the Linux kernel. So we don't need these additional drives and we don't want them cluttering up the side panel. So what we're going to do is power off the Ubuntu guest and just open up VMware Workstation Player. And then we're going to configure the Ubuntu's virtual machine settings. Okay, so what we can do is just select this floppy drive and remove it. And we can select the additional CD DVD drive that was added and remove this. So the one we originally had has the 2 there. So let's just delete the one that was added. We could also delete this one as well, but it's useful to have it, so I'm just going to leave this one. But I'm not going to have it connected, and I'm not going to have it connected at power up. So once the Ubuntu guest boots and I'm logged on to the desktop, I should no longer see these mounted drives on the side panel. Okay, so before doing anything else on the Ubuntu guest, it's recommended to update it so it's patched to the latest version. So what you want to do is select Software Updater. And then you're going to want to select Install Now. Now this is going to require permissions, so you're going to see this authentication prompt, and here you need to input your password and select Authenticate. So this is the Linux counterpart to Windows User Account Control prompt, but it's a bit safer because you need to actually input your password to authenticate the action instead of just blindly clicking OK. So the updates will be installed, and then you're going to be prompted for a restart. So select Restart Now, and this is going to restart the Ubuntu guest. Okay, so drag and drop isn't supported on the GNOME desktop, which is used in Ubuntu. So if you attempt to drag and drop a file, it's essentially going to float the file in midair, and the drag and drop doesn't seem to work in either direction. So what we're going to do is change the virtual machine settings and enable shared folders. So let's just create this VM shared folder in Documents and select this folder, and then select Next, and then select Finish, and then select OK. So unfortunately this shared folder in Ubuntu isn't automatically mounted. So what we're going to do is go to Documents and create another folder called VM Shared. And then what we're going to do is link them together. So we're going to go to Startup Applications and create a new application called VMware Shared Folders. And if I just go to my written guide, which will be in the video description, I can copy and paste the following command. Now you're going to want to check the file path of your actual VM shared folder within your user profile. So the path highlighted should be updated corresponding to your actual path, and then you want to select Add and then select Close. Now because this is a startup application, what we're going to need to do is reboot. and then as it reboots, it's going to carry out this new instruction. And so if we log in and now just examine this folder, let's just drag this to the left. Notice that it's shared. So let me just create a new file in it. So let's just create a Python script file. Okay, I'm going to need to show the file extension because this is a .py.txt file. So I want a script.py file. And let's just open this in Notepad and just type in print hello world. And then just go ahead and save this file. Okay, so I don't know why there's an error here, but let me just click send this. So we'll send this bug to Canonical and hopefully they can fix it. So we need to go out of the shared folder and back into it to refresh its contents. So let's just open this in the text editor and let's just change the text that's going to be printed from hello world to bye world and save this. So we can automatically see the changes have been carried out on the Windows 11 guest, and the shared folders are set up as expected. Let's now have a look at connecting a USB device. So I've got a Logitech Pro 9000, which is a webcam, so I'm going to need to install the application Cheese, and I can get this from the Ubuntu Application Center. Once again, I'm going to need to authenticate, so I need to input my password in order to install this snap package. So now Cheese is installed. I can go to all applications and select Cheese. So it's connected to the webcam, and you can see my hand as I move it in front of the camera. And I can change the camera's preferences. So it seems to freeze here until I close and reopen Cheese. Okay, so adding a USB device is fairly straightforward. And most common USB devices will have a driver pre-installed in the Linux kernel. Let's now have a look at a serial port. So if I right click the Start button on the Windows 11 guest and select Device Manager, I can see I've got a USB to serial port adapter, and here we can see that it's COM3, and we can have a look at the port settings. So what I'm going to do is back up the virtual machine. So I can just back it up by copying its folder. So if something goes wrong, I can just delete the Ubuntu 64-bit folder and then rename the copy folder to Ubuntu 64-bit, and then I'm restoring the machine to a previously known working state. So I can modify the virtual machine settings and add a serial port, and I'm going to change it to use COM3. You can use the auto detect, but you may get confused if you're using multiple serial ports. So in that case, it's recommended to know what serial port is what and add them one at a time. Okay, so serial ports are handled differently in Ubuntu, and generally you're going to use the terminal, and there's this terminal input output that needs to be installed. So what we're going to type in is sudo snap install terminal input output, and then we're going to need to authenticate by inputting our password. So this snap package isn't sandbox, so therefore we need to add this option classic, which will install it as a classic package that isn't sandboxed and can have access to other things such as the serial ports. So now that it's installed, what we can do is type in sudo superuser tio and then list, and this is going to list the serial port. So we see it's TTY-S0. And what we can do is connect to this and set its baud rate, for example, to 9600. So we see we're connected to this serial port. And you can use this serial port to control a device using normally the terminal on Ubuntu. Okay, so that's just a quick overview of setting up a Ubuntu guest. Now let's set up a Windows guest. So what we're going to do now is go to the Microsoft website and download the Windows 11 installation ISO. So we want to select the last option here, which will give us the ISO directly. The other options give Windows applications which cannot be run on Linux. So select 64-bit download. And now that we've downloaded the Windows 11 installation ISO, we can use it to create a Windows 11 guest virtual machine. So open up VMware Workstation Player, select Player, File, New Virtual Machine. This time we're going to load the Windows 11 installation ISO. Windows 11 64-bit will automatically be detected. Select Next. In the next screen, we're going to need to input a password and confirm the password, and this is going to be for the Trusted Platform module. In the next screen, we're going to have the default disk size, which again is restrictive. So let's just increase this to 256 gigabytes. All the other default options are okay. So let's just select Finish. And here you're going to be actually interrupted and you're going to be asked whether you want to download VMware tools. And even if you minimize this prompt, you can't click into the virtual machine until this user account control prompt displays and you select yes. And by the time you actually click into the virtual machine, this prompt has timed out, so you need to restart it and then click into the virtual machine and then press any key such as H to boot from the Windows 11 installation ISO. So select Next and then select Install Windows 11. Agree that you're going to wipe the virtual drive and install Windows 11. Select Skip at the product key, then select your edition and then select Accept. Now select Disk 0 unallocated space and then select Next and then select Install. So it's going to go ahead and install Windows 11. Next, select your language again, and it's going to check for some updates here. So here it only checks for a small number of updates and then it will reboot. So here input the name of your Windows 11 virtual machine. So I'm just going to call it VM. And then select Next. And then it's going to reboot. And here select Setup for personal use and then select Next. So here it's going to check for more updates, and this time it's going to find a large number of updates and download them. So it's going to apply these updates and then you're going to be taken to the login screen. So if you select sign in your only option is going to be to sign in with a Microsoft account. Now I don't want to do this. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go to removable devices, network adapter, and then settings, and then basically disconnect the virtual Ethernet. So the Windows 11 guest is going to be offline. Then I'm going to press Shift and F10 to open up the command prompt. And then I'm going to type in this command, OOBE, out of the box experience, and then this left slash, and then bypass NRO, which is the network required option. So the Windows 11 guest will now reboot, and it's going to be offline. And then you're going to be asked for the keyboard layout and regional settings, and you can select I don't have internet. And now you can create a local account. Optionally input a password, and here you can select your privacy settings. So review each setting, taking into account your privacy and the functionality that it gives within Windows 11. Okay, so now we've essentially reached the end of the out-of-the-box experience setup. So we can reconnect to the internet. So to do this, go to Player, Removable Devices, Network Adapter, and then Settings, and then check the two boxes. So now Windows 11 is installed, so we can select I finished installing. And I think this is supposed to automatically mount VMware tools. But it doesn't seem to in this case. So if I open up File Explorer and then select this PC, I've still got the Windows 11 installation ISO here. So what I want to do is go to Player, Manage, and then install VMware tools. And this installation ISO should change. And I can launch the setup to install VMware tools. Okay, so select Next, use the typical settings, select Next, and then select Install. And then select Finish, and then Yes to restart the Windows 11 guest. So now that VMware tools are installed, you should be able to resize the window on the Windows 11 host, and the Windows 11 guest will automatically resize to match the size of this window. So let me just snap this to the right. And the Windows desktop environment used in Windows 11 is supported by VMware tools. So you can essentially drag and drop from one to the other. So let me just demonstrate this using the Microsoft Edge shortcut. And actually in both cases I can just get rid of this shortcut. Okay, let's now have a look at connecting a USB device. So let's just use the same Logitech Pro 9000. And then I can open up the camera application, which is pre-installed. And then I'm going to need to select yes, and then yes. And here I can see that the camera is working, so let me just select yes again. Okay, so the response time seems to be a bit faster than the default settings that were used within Cheese. So we can probably modify some of the camera settings here. There doesn't seem to be too many options. So we can use the camera just to create a video. And let's just save this video, and then let's see if we can open it up. So let's check videos. Okay, so it's not here, so it's likely to be in pictures. So it's under the camera roll. And here we can see the video from the USB webcam, Logitech Pro 9000, that was passed through to the Windows 11 guest from the Windows 11 host. Let me just power down the Windows 11 guest, and now I'm going to have a look at a serial port. So if we right click the start button on the Windows 11 host and then select Device Manager, we can see that the serial port is COM3, and if we have a look at its properties, we can see what the COM port settings are, and we can also change the COM port number. So if we open up VMware Workstation Player and select our Windows 11 guest virtual machine, we can edit the virtual machine settings, and we can add the serial port. So you can auto detect the serial port, which is useful if you've only got one serial port. If you're using multiple, then you're probably going to want to specify what each serial port is and add them one at a time, so you don't get any confusion. So now we can check the device manager out on the Windows 11 guest, and here we see it's COM port 1, and once again we can change its settings and port number. So these settings would be customized for whatever serial device you're going to add to the Windows 11 guest.